Secretly recorded from deep inside the bowels of a decommissioned missile silo, we bring you the man, one single man who wants to bring light to the darkness and dark to the lightness. Although he's not always right, he is always certain. So now, with security protocols in place, the protesters have been forced back behind the barricades and the blast doors are now sealed. Without further delay, let me introduce you to the host of Hutcast, Mr. Tim Hutner.
Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. You can now take your post.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are solely those of the individual and participants. These views and opinions expressed do not represent those of the host or the show. The opinions in this broadcast are not to replace your legal, medical, or spiritual professionals.
Happy Sunday. Today is 18th of August, 2024. And on Hutcast today, we have a very special guest. She's out of the Spokane, Washington area. Dr. Renata Moon, MD. She's a pediatrician. And if you don't know about pediatricians, it's concerned with the physical, emotional, and social health of children from birth to adulthood. And she's going to give us some information on COVID shots and a couple of other things that I want to surprise you with. So for Hutcast, thanks for tuning in. Stand by. We're going to take a break for our sponsors, and then we're going to have a little conversation with Renata, Dr. Moon. We'll be right back.
The current healthcare system is not meeting the needs of real people. People are demanding better care, better options, and want results. So Gareth Care has launched and is advocating for those in the U.S. and internationally, as people are realizing the controlled system has not been there for them. If you want your own independent advocate that is not controlled by big corporations, call or text and enroll today to get your advocate for your needs, serving all ages. For any healthcare needs you might have, you matter. Here's how you get started. www.garethcare.com. That is GRAITHCARE.com. Call Gareth Care direct at 469-864-7149. Call or text the questions to Healthcare Sucks and get an advocate with Gareth Care. 469-864-7149. Mention Hutcast and you will get an additional 10% discount on your first advocacy bundle. The staff at Gareth Care will take care of you. Remember, mention Hutcast and get that extra 10% off your first bundle of time. And this is all brought to you from Gareth Care.
Welcome back to Hutcast. Today, Dr. Renata Moon is on the phone with us, and she is from the upper Midwest. Doctor, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you?
I'm well, thank you for taking your time and visiting with us. If I didn't tell you, we're in 98 countries now, and we got well over 45 million followers with 7 languages that I know of are being translated. And so we'll try and keep it to the point for all these people that have to do all that work, okay?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Wonderful audience.
It's been a great deal, and I'll tell you what, I have a lot of great people all over the globe. They hear the same things we're hearing. But let's start out with you. I mean, who are you?
Yeah, I'm a practicing pediatrician that woke up to the horror of what's happening as we rolled into 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
And, I think once your eyes are open to this, they're pretty wide open.
Well, let's not get too advanced. Who are you? How did you start out? I understand you're from Prague, or your parents were from Prague?
Yeah, no, I was born here in the U.S. to parents who legally immigrated from a communist country. My dad was actually born in Argentina, and my mom was born in Prague. And they met in college. They met behind the Iron Curtain, as they called it, of communism in former Czechoslovakia. And, we're married, but had no future in that country, in Czechoslovakia. My mom tells large stories about the horrors of communism. And so I grew up in a family where I just knew how lucky I was to be growing up in America. I was born right here in America. I valued freedom, continue to value freedom today, but I knew how lucky we were because I actually saw communism firsthand as a 11-year-old when my mom took me back into the country to visit relatives. So
Wow.
I saw it firsthand.
Holy
Yeah.
cow. I bet
Yeah.
that was an eye-opener, huh?
Well, people say there's that old, song, and I think it's more of a poem of, over the, what is it, over the river and through the woods to your grandmother's house. Well, for me, it was a little different. I didn't really know my grandparents very well. They were trapped behind really enemy lines of communism. They couldn't speak openly and freely. My aunts and uncles were absolutely, restricted, like all citizens were, in their everyday life and what they were allowed to do. They couldn't even travel from one village to another without checking in at the local police department and announcing themselves and receiving permission to be there to visit, someone in an adjacent village. Very restricted in travel. Very
Wow.
restricted in any jobs they could choose. They were assigned jobs. I saw that firsthand.
Isn't that something? I always try to flash back into some episodes, and one of our first ones was a gal who met Hitler, and she was in her 90s then, and I hear the same stories. What could you tell the young or the people who listen to this broadcast of what are we seeing in today's world versus what you've seen when you were growing up?
Well, I think what I'm concerned about is I'm seeing young people who are all of a sudden embracing communism as if it's this wonderful thing. Look back at history. Communism has never turned out well. These tyrannical systems don't turn out well. They turn out terribly for, millions of people that die under their grasp. And I'm concerned about these young people who seem to think that, this will be different. Just look back at history. It's, you take away people's incentive to work. You take away people's ability to just live meaningful lives it's just really sad to watch it unfolding here. I don't have any amazing story of having met any one person when I visited under communism, but I was there on several occasions. And the one thing that stands out to me, and there's many things, but one day I was traveling there through Vienna, and my suitcase was lost in the airline. They just lost it. So I didn't have any clothes except for the clothes on my back, and I had to go shopping in Czechoslovakia. So I bought clothes there. They were all Czech clothes. And, here I am, a descendant of relatives that came from Czechoslovakia. But people could tell I was an American as I was walking down the street before I even uttered anything or said anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I do speak Czech, but people can tell pretty quickly because you kind of lose. There's ways they can tell.
The dialect,
you might say
yeah.
something a little differently. But I said, how in the world? I said, these are total strangers. I said, how in the world do you know that I'm an American when I haven't said a word and I'm wearing Czech clothes and I come from people who were born here in this country. And they looked at me and they said, well, it's obvious you're happy. When you walk down the street, you look happy. And that just struck me, because I wasn't looking down at the ground and just looking depressed and like everybody else was around me. I was
Sure.
smiling apparently and looking around, and they could tell immediately that, I was an American. I wasn't from there.
You didn't doom and gloom.
Yeah, I wasn't doom and gloom. Yeah,
You didn't have the Eeyore going.
I guess not.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Isn't that something? If we keep letting them cancel our culture, we'll never know where we came from, and then they'll never know to repeat the future of the past.
Yeah, they have that saying that history is written by the victors, right? So they keep twisting things around in ways that are they're just gaslighting us. They're censoring us. They're gaslighting us. They're twisting everything in a way that fits their narrative, and it confuses people. It loses them in this mist and this smoke. They can't quite tell which way is up, but they're really doing their best to confuse the whole situation.
We have a interesting presidential race. We have a Californian and we have a Minnesotan. And both of them aren't qualified for office as far as I'm concerned. But they on a regular basis, they do that in their job. And people can't see past that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're. I'm sorry, I missed part of what you were saying.
Well, I'm getting to the point of they constantly are gaslighting us. They want us to believe that their way is the best way. Just exactly what you said, and they're running for president. I mean, not that the other guy is much of a pick, but you look at this and go, really? That's the best the DNC can throw out there?
Yeah, I mean, everything is being gaslit right now. You look at the news, and it's not the news, right? We've had such propaganda in our media for so long. I saw that with my grandmother in her apartment, listening. We were actually sitting with my grandmother when I was little. I was 11, and we were listening to the Voice of America, which was us. It was the Americans piping in the truth to a nation that no longer had any free and fair press. They didn't have that. And I was so proud as a little kid to know that us, the Americans, were piping in the truth to my relatives. I never thought I'd see such propaganda here in our nation, and it's everywhere.
Yes.
There's no real news. President Trump calls it the fake news. And of course he knows, but it's propaganda. It's just lies. And here and there they'll sprinkle some truth in it just so that it confuses people all the more. But there's no truth in this anymore. We see those headlines. They're confusing everybody. And the bottom line is we're not in a position right now to elect anyone with the way that this is looking. We don't have true and accurate information coming to us from our media.
Nope.
We have great concerns about the fraud in our election process.
Yeah.
And my mom says, well, we had elections under communism. We had the day off, and we all went down, and we all voted, and we all had a box that we had to check for each different position for these candidates, and they watched over us to make sure we checked the right box. And in many cases, it was only one box, but you had to check it. And that was their quote unquote freedom. They didn't have any freedom. Their leaders were selected for them. And we, unfortunately, have very much the same thing going here. Our leaders are being selected for us, which does not give us, the people, any say in the election process.
Right.
And then we lose our country. And it's all this swirl of propaganda. But you control the media and you control the masses. That's been something that we've been taught historically, and we're watching it play out.
Again and again.
Yeah.
I take us down this rabbit hole to set you up for what you've seen in your professional career. Here's why. If you can just imagine for just a minute of how we're being controlled as far as the media is concerned, the fake news, the whatever you want to call it. And here you are, a certified professional, MD, pediatrician, and you're being told what to do and what not to do. Is that correct?
Yeah, the last few years, absolutely. And I forgot to give my disclaimer at the beginning of this.
Let's start that. Go ahead.
My words are my own. I'm not here representing any employer, past or present. I always give that disclaimer because they've come after me for simply thinking and speaking. It's become that crazy. So 5 years ago, 2019,
mm-hmm.
I would have said we were quite free in our ability to think, in our ability to tell patients, I recommend this or I recommend that, or this is my advice to you after 25 plus years of pediatric practice, which that was my job.
Right.
And now today I can tell you we don't have that freedom. We're not free to tell you openly what we believe to be the best course of action for your child. We don't have that ability with many of our employers, for most pediatricians, for most of our employers. Our news media, because we have news media in medicine also, we get email newsletters that come into our files, our email files. We get written newsletters that come in, talking about this medication or that treatment. They're all full of propaganda too. And propaganda is the same thing really as lies for an intent to deceive and for an intent to push people in a certain direction. So if you look at our media as physicians, it's completely full of propaganda.
Oh, big time.
And everywhere. Our journals are fraudulent. These are funded by big pharma. Pharmacy funds everything. So they control everything. Our government has become one of the biggest advertisers for these pharmaceutical companies, and they control our medical schools. They control your physicians' employers.
Mm-hmm.
They control your healthcare. So you may be sitting in that exam room and you maybe still be thinking, well, my doctor has my best interest at heart.
Yeah.
But how many other people are sitting in that exam room with you unseen? Because your doctor has many conflicts of interest right now. Many. Yeah.
Isn't that something? You took an oath, a Hippocratic oath, is that correct?
We did. Yeah.
That you can employ.
You can, but it comes with a price.
Have they gone after you?
I've held my Hippocratic oath because I spoke out. So I'm not going to, I think, get into the whole story here tonight, but many have heard about what happened. It's not about what happened to me. It's about the fact that it happened, and it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I spoke about my legitimate concerns about the dangers of the COVID-19 shot being given to pediatric patients. And I spoke at a Senate hearing at the request of a sitting U.S. Senator in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And as a result of that, my medical school employer, I had 2 jobs. I was a clinical professor of medicine at several medical schools. I've done that my whole career. I've taught medical students, residents, interns. And I also was a practicing pediatrician, actively seeing patients. And my medical school employer saw my testimony. This medical school employer was in Washington State, completely on the opposite side of the country from Washington, D.C., where I spoke at the Senate hearing. But my employer didn't like that I spoke. And you can read the letter they wrote to me a few months later.
Mm-hmm.
And then they terminated my employment just a few months after that letter came, alleging, really they did it by not renewing my annual faculty contract at the last minute, just days before it was to be renewed. And then after they, failed to renew my annual faculty contract, so thus terminating my employment, my employer reported the fact that I'd spoken at this public hearing in Washington, D.C., to the Medical Licensing Board of Washington State. They reported me for potential unprofessional conduct for having expressed my concerns. So you can read all about that. If the listener is interested in reading more, you can actually read the actual letters that were written by the medical school. You can read the letters from the licensing board. I should say I had a clean record. I have always had a clean record of patient care, despite working as a hospital physician for most of my career with, high risk, really sick children in my care. I've never had any lawsuits, never had any actions against me. But the licensing board investigated me for speaking at the Senate hearing, for just for voicing my concerns about the dangers of the shot. And I simply said at that Senate hearing, I said, look, there's an increase in myocarditis. I showed the package insert from a box of mRNA product that was a massive piece of paper that said intentionally blank on it and was otherwise blank, except for the words intentionally blank. I said, we're being silenced and censored. And I said, other nations have shut this down for their younger citizens, for their pediatric patients and young adults, because they say that the dangers exceed any benefits of the shot for young people. I said, what are we doing? What are we doing? So really I was asking and presenting my concerns to a member of my government, to a sitting U.S. senator. And for that, they came after me. Yeah.
Did they hang you on stuff, or was it trumped up, or did it get dismissed, or how did it end?
Well, so it's complicated, but they investigated someone who actually I no longer actually had an active license even in the state at the time, because after practicing in Washington State for 19 years, I had decided I could no longer ethically practice medicine there if I couldn't speak. And this was earlier in the year. So I had actually not renewed my license. So at the time that they came after me, I no longer had an active state medical license. And they knew that when they launched the investigation against me. And then they dismissed it a few months later after making me answer many questions. All those questions are public information. You can read them. They're on the webpage. But they harassed me for a while with those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then they dismissed it on the grounds that I no longer had an active state medical license. Well, they knew that when they launched the investigation against me in the first place. So to me, this is a very clear direct weaponization of our regulatory agencies against the free speech of a U.S. citizen and practicing pediatrician with legitimate safety concerns. And that should worry all of us. We've come to a place that I never would have imagined we would be in. And given my family history, I'm particularly terrified about the place that we find ourselves in. This is the beginning of the end for all of us if it continues down this path. We cannot be silencing people, especially with the data that has become increasingly clear over the last several years. I mean, there's no one even questions now that there's been an increase in myocarditis in young people as a result of this shot. The truth is coming out. And I stand by the words that I spoke at that Senate hearing. I was concerned then. I remain highly concerned and alarmed now. And we need to all continue speaking the truth, or we will lose that ability and lose that freedom. But the bottom line is, had I gone to that Senate hearing and spoken things that were concerns but were untrue, then I still had the right to do it. But as it turned out, I was right. And so we find ourselves in an interesting place, right? So this is not about what happened to me specifically. This is about the fact that it happened. And as a nation, we can't tolerate this. As a world, we can't tolerate a place where the pharmaceutical companies get to push whatever product they want without any stop button,
Sure.
right? Without any way to
no due diligence.
question.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah. Right.
We had a doctor in this state of Minnesota here, and his name was Dr. Scott Jensen. Does that ring a bell to you?
Yeah. Yeah, I've met him. He's a wonderful man.
Oh,
Wonderful.
I'll tell you what, he's aces with me. And he'd call me up and he'd say, let's do a show. And he'd be in town, and we'd just start talking. And I tell you what, he's got a level head on his shoulders, and we really appreciate the time we had with him. And you sound like that kind of person.
Yeah, he's a really great man. And actually, they had just the news had just come out about my losing my position at the medical school as a result of that public testimony in Washington, D.C. And I was at an event in D.C. and I actually, the news had just broken about that situation that I was facing. And there he was. And he said, "You got to be kidding me." He said, I just was reading about your situation this morning and sending it on to all these people so they would know what had happened. And here you are.
Right.
And it was the first time we met. He said, it just must be meant to be that we met this morning. So, he's a great advocate for free speech and all that needs to happen. So
you met this morning?
No, I met him. Sorry, this was like a year ago when it came out. Yeah, a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah. No, what a good guy.
He was at an event. He's a very good guy. And I, actually, as the news was breaking about what was happening in my situation, I was actually in Washington, D.C. for this event. But at that day, as the news was breaking, I happened to be at Arlington, sitting next to the tomb of the unknown soldier. And I take that as a sign that we're doing the right thing. We're all fighting for freedom here.
We are.
And that's what we have to continue to do, because this is unbelievable that we have gotten to this point.
Well, Doc, I'm at 20 minutes into this first section here, and I gotta cut a break. Let's come back to the show here, if you can, and let's talk about direction, what the conservative person or what the logical person or whatever that is. How do you stop and say, enough's enough? Can you stand by?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Hudcast going to take a break, about 21 minutes and 15 seconds into this section, and we'll be right back.
Need a quick, healthy boost to start your day? Try Superfuel. Superfuel by Casmo is loaded with vitamins and healthy ingredients that will give you a quick, healthy boost. Make Superfuel a great-tasting, low-calorie addition to your daily regimen. Order Superfuel at www.superfuel.me or call 833-FUEL-X12, FUEL-X12, or 833-383-5912, Super Fuel. Welcome back to Podcast. Dr. Moon is in the, well, not in the studio, but in presence. She's a heck of a gal, and I'll tell you what, we can learn some things from her, Doc. You come back with us?
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Thank you.
Okay, you had mentioned in the last section, where do people find this stuff? Let's plug some intel into this.
Yeah, so I actually, for having expressed my legitimate concerns about the safety of a product being given to children, I now have a legal team, and they're a wonderful legal team. But as crazy as this all is, they have been wonderful and stepped in to help all of us fight for our freedom. They're called Silent Majority Foundation, and they created a webpage. So you can look at silentmajorityfoundation.org. All just one word, silentmajorityfoundation.org.
Okay.
And if you scroll down that webpage just a little bit, you'll see Dr. Moon. That's me. Click on that, and then it opens up a whole section that describes what happened, has the actual letters under the section called case documents. So absolutely look at the letters. These are all public information. These are letters from the medical school, letters from the Washington Medical Commission, which is the licensing board of Washington State, all coming after a physician for speaking at a Senate hearing at the request of a sitting U.S. senator and expressing her concerns. And it's pretty surreal, I think, from my end to look at what's happened.
Oh, I can imagine.
And to think, wow,
you're being attacked.
This is what my family, my grandfather fled from the communist system. My mother fled from the communist system. And then here we go. And I think every generation is clearly going to be in a position where we have to fight against this type of tyrannical system coming into place. I know how proud my grandfather was about the fact that my mother had managed to get out of the country. He was so proud that we were growing up here in America. I remember just he was old enough that they would let him alone come visit, or, they didn't really care about their senior citizens coming back. They wanted their workforce to come back. But so he had a chance to visit America on a couple occasions, and he just was so proud of this country, and the fact that my mom had managed to get us here, and that I was born here in America, and just all the things that a new immigrant family feels at being given not the gift of wealth in America, but the gift of freedom.
And it's what you said. It was the they did the process too, not just, hey, come on over and go where you want to, or type of thing. There was an intake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. So my parents, when they escaped from the country, they fled, and my mom was actually charged in her absence she was actually charged and sentenced to several years of hard labor camp, and her charge was failure to return to her country. That was the charge. They sentenced her to several years of hard labor if she ever was to be caught. But by then, she was here in America, and she had an American passport. They had to apply. My parents applied for citizenship, and in those days, they were waiting, and they were in Vienna, in Austria, waiting. They applied like you would apply to college. They applied to Australia, Canada, the United States. They had to prove that they would not be a burden on society. Mm-hmm. If they came here, they had to sign paperwork saying they would not go on any state aid, that they would try to work their hardest and support themselves. And they did exactly that. They came here, they worked very hard. They both had college degrees from Czechoslovakia that they'd earned, but they didn't have any documentation of that because they had fled with just the clothes on their back. So they couldn't prove it at first until my grandmother smuggled the papers out some number of years later. But they just took menial jobs. My mom worked as a cleaning lady in some homes. My dad mucked out horse stalls. Those were their first jobs here in America, and they were proud of them. They worked hard. They supported our family, and they eventually were able to earn enough money that they were able to put themselves through graduate school. So both of my parents actually both earned their PhDs here in America.
Wow.
And are absolutely the example of what it meant to be an American in those days. It meant, you work hard, that rags to riches story. Came here with $2 in their pocket and were able to earn PhDs and have very successful careers, both of them, here in the land of opportunity, with nothing holding them back like that. But I want to be clear, they were vetted as immigrants. They were absolutely vetted, and they came here as law-abiding immigrants who wanted to assimilate into American society, who wanted to be part of America. And they raised me to love this country, absolutely love this country.
So what do you think happened over the years? Do you think that too many people got complacent with saying the government and us? Or because, you talk to some of these people and they say, well, the government's going to pay for it. And you got to slap them inside the head and say, really, did you just hear yourself? We are the government and we are paying for it. So what happened to those? How did they separate? How did these people, these companies, these manipulators teach these people that the government is a separate entity than who they are? How do you do that?
Yeah, well, I think twofold. I think one, clearly we became very soft as a country, where our kids had it so good and they don't really want to work as hard, and they just became softer and softer. Why work so hard for $20 an hour? That's, I'm not worth, I want to earn more. And you hear that from this younger generation. Well, it's only a $20 an hour job. I don't want it.
Only.
And I say to them, are you kidding me? I said, do you have an advanced degree? Do you have a skill that you can provide? Or do you even have a high school degree? And they say, well, no, I don't have a high school degree. And I say, well, I would suggest you take that $14 or $20 an hour job and be very grateful for it. But they lost their work ethic. But more importantly than that, I think what happened is very clear, because my mom warned me about this for years. Mm-hmm. So when she was in high school back under communism, they were actively taught in her high school classes. Now, of course, she didn't do anything wrong. I want to be very clear about that. My mom loves this country, very law-abiding, and loves this country. She's still alive, and this is her beloved homeland now. But they taught them as high schoolers how to bring down a nation like America, and not just like America, but specifically how to bring down America. And the plan was, over many, many decades, to erode family values, to get rid of religion, to pit one group against another.
Yep.
Like they did during the Bolshevik Revolution, right? All these different revolutions. You look at the Red Guard under Chairman Mao in China. I mean, all these things had the same sort of flavor, but pit one group against another, erode the values, turn the youth against their, elders and against the culture of their country. Control the media, get into the media, control the media. This has all been done very meticulously and very carefully and very slowly over many, many, many years, and really over decades. But my mom is just horrified, because she says this is exactly what they taught us when I was a young child. I was being trained how to take care of a country like America, how to take it down. And you bring it to its knees from within by destroying the family values and by destroying the units that make our country function, the family and religion. So it's all there. They were clear about it from many decades ago, how they would do this. And it's a huge flaw really of our country, in that we are so forgiving and we are so kind, and we do let so many different people in to our nation, which is what makes us that wonderful melting pot of all these different cultures and all these different opinions and ideas. And it's wonderful, but it's also a big flaw, because it allows people to penetrate into us in a way that we have to really guard against. And we became complacent. We didn't see it happening.
And how do you not become jaded with all that? How do you handle that? How do I
handle it?
Sure.
I'll be honest, I'm not handling it terribly well lately. This is really starting to be very frightening. When I see them coming after our free speech, when I see that we have reached a tipping point with this, where we have just tipped into what to me appears to be complete insanity, and we have colleagues and other citizens who seem like reasonably rational people supporting this kind of behavior,
Mm-hmm.
I do find it rather terrifying, and I think it's impossible to ignore. So I handle it by speaking out about it. I think that the more we speak out about it, the more it goes away. And what we need is everyone to stop being fearful and to speak out about it.
Right.
But you have to understand, as a practicing pediatrician in Washington State, I was at the forefront of this. Not only was I a clinical associate professor of medicine at a medical school, so I could see what was happening at the medical education level, but I was also a practicing pediatrician in the state. And I could see what was happening to the mental health of our nation's children, which has just plummeted off a cliff. Our children are not healthy. They're not healthy. So many suffer from anxiety and depression.
Yep. There you go. That's where I was going to take this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, after the masks, after the COVID, after the wrap up of all these developing children, how long were you on staff before you stopped to see this?
Well, I still practice. I just don't practice in Washington any longer. So
Okay.
I left Washington State after all this brouhaha about my free speech. But I still practice in our country. And so I still travel around the country. And I work in different locations right now. So I've continued to witness what is happening. Now, it's not evenly distributed across the states, right? The mental health of kids is maybe horrible in one location and a lot better in another. But what I saw in Washington, I think, was where we are headed with all states if this continues. And the number of children, to put this into perspective for you, I want to say two things. One is that the COVID pandemic was not the main catalyst for destroying the mental health of our kids, although it certainly did that.
Okay.
This started earlier with social media and with the cell phone use. This was like around 2012, 2014. Our emergency rooms began filling up with kids who were anxious, depressed, suicidal, and they were all holding a weapon in their hands, and that is the cell phone.
Wow.
The cell phones were feeding them absolute garbage, and they were buying into it. And then on top of that, then the pandemic hit with the forced masking, the isolation, the horrible things that we did to children for really no scientific reason at all. And then their mental health just completely fell apart. And so to put this in perspective, when I first began practice in the late 1990s, I was in a very busy practice in Houston, Texas, one of my first practices.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not even know who my local child psychiatrist was. I maybe sent 1 or 2 children a year to see a child psychiatrist.
Okay.
People were fine. The kids were healthy. Forward now to Washington State, and the last time I practiced in Washington State was in 2021. I had probably 6 or 7 a day that were anxious, depressed, possibly suicidal, but had mental health issues. 6 to 7 a day.
Wow.
And multiple referrals a week to see psychiatry, to see psychology, to get into the mental health care system. The mental health care system is overwhelmed with your children, with our children, with our nation's children, filling it up. We're destroying their future. We're destroying their mental health. And it's coming from all the crazy happening, and it's coming from the cell phones, and it's coming from the horrible indoctrinating kind of material that is being fed to them from Hollywood.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Or let's fast forward a little bit to the Olympics.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Pick a gender. We all know this is common sense people, but really, this is going to go down that path. These kids are confused already.
Yeah. We have taken children and we have given them an altered reality, and we wonder why they're confused when they grow up. We're not giving them
right.
We're not giving them, okay, this is real, this is fiction. And Dr. Mark McDonald, who is a wonderful pediatric psychiatrist who's been very outspoken about what's happening across our country, said it very clearly one time when I was speaking with him. He said, look, your child runs around when they're little and their imaginations are great. That's wonderful. That's how they grow. They're flapping their wings. They're a bird. They're flying on the lawn as they're running around. But now they've climbed up onto the roof. Well, you don't stand there and say, way to go, jump off the roof, you can fly, you're a bird.
You can identify as a bird.
You say, Billy, get the heck down here right now. You're not a bird. You need to get on the ground. And you don't let them jump from that second story building, right? We are letting our nation's children jump from a second story building by teaching them all of this crazy. And it is, and where it's become very confusing for people is that so many Americans, and I'm one of them, I'm sure you are too, none of us want to be unkind to that rare child who is truly transgender, or that rare child who, has different ideas about who they are growing up, okay? But there's a difference between being kind and understanding to a child that has a rare difference in the way they're being, they're perceiving themselves.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between that and actively promoting it
Right.
in the young years.
Indoctrinating
And that's
them.
what we're doing right now. They are being indoctrinated,
Yep.
indoctrinated into this. And I will tell you that when I practiced in Washington State, this is horrifying to me still. I had children as young as 3 and 4 years of age being brought to my office by their parents, and their parents telling me that they were gender transitioning that 3 and 4-year-old child. But don't worry, Dr. Moon, they told me. And they would name the name of the child. So-and-so has made up their own mind.
Oh.
This is a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old.
No.
I'm sorry, but we all know, even 7 or 8-year-olds, I'll be doing a physical exam, and all of a sudden this 7 or 8-year-old starts squawking at me and is turned into an imaginary flamingo, okay? That's great that they have an imagination, but they're still back and forth between reality and the truth. And that's how vivid their imaginations are. That's great. That's normal. It is not normal for a parent to be telling a 3 and a 4-year-old that they are something that they are not.
And not being in that position as a parent of a child like that, or a young adult like that. We have some people that around us here in the city that we know, and she used that same analogy of her little boy trying to be a girl at the 3 and 4-year-old age, and everybody, and even CPS wouldn't step in and say, this is abuse.
It's really difficult for me to witness this, and for all of us to see this and to think anything but that it's abusive.
Yes.
How can it be anything but abuse?
Right.
If that same parent brought their child to an office, to a pediatrician's office, and said to the pediatrician, "This is my 4-year-old son, Billy. I put a collar on him every night. He wears a leash. We make him bark like a dog, and he eats food from a dog dish." We would call Child Protective Services, okay?
Yeah.
And yet, when a child says they're a furry in Illinois, the school pulls out litter boxes for them and lets them pee in the litter box.
Yeah.
This has become so insane that one has to question where the adults are. And not just the adults in that child's family, but every adult in that community and in our nation, because this has got to stop. This is ruining, this is destroying the mental health of our nation's children. And so if you bring a 3-year-old to me and you're telling that 3-year-old that they're not a girl, this is a 3-year-old girl comes into my office, and that parent is telling that 3-year-old that they're not a girl, that they're a boy. They've given him a boy name. They refer to this child with, he, him pronouns.
Oh.
How is that not abusive? That is something that has altered reality. That is not the truth. And that's a far cry from someone who is an adult. If an adult chooses that or comes out and says, "Look, I'm transgender," or whatever, and I'm not going to speak to that. That's an adult. An adult can make their own decision. But these are young, impressionable children who are still learning what is real and what is not real. And the surgeries that are being performed on these young people are catastrophic. You are turning them in to patients who will receive hormones and medications for the rest of their life for a condition that they self-diagnosed or that they were potentially raised to believe they had by people in their environment. You're turning them into a patient for the rest of their life with cross-sex hormones and with puberty blockers and with other medications. And then if you perform surgery on them, you're not putting that tissue back. When they're an adult and they say, "Okay, I want my penis back," that penis is not miraculously going to reappear. You have removed a perfectly healthy body part for absolutely no reason. I don't understand how we've gone down this road, other than that it is simply unbelievable and purely evil to have done that to a child.
And the answer here is, well, I don't know if it's the answer. Let me rephrase that. One of the things I see is too many people aren't saying no. Participation trophies. There's a team of 15 kids. Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody wins. Everybody, losing builds character.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that when the parents don't have character, the kids aren't going to have character.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I just was thinking how, I remember playing as a child, we just had the street. We just went out and played in the street. Now I realize not everyone lives in an area where maybe it's safe to go play in their street, but let them have free play. Let them use their imagination. They can take a box and some markers and turn it into all sorts of things. A box that the dishwasher came in can become, it can become a spacecraft to take you to outer space.
Yep.
It can become a car that you drive in and you go down to you drive it to Hawaii across the ocean. It's an amphibious vehicle. You could do so many things with your box and your markers. And instead, we're teaching our children to be fearful. We are teaching them that fantasy equals reality. We are teaching them there is no such thing as no. And
Right.
One of the worst things we're doing is we're putting these weapons into their hands at very young ages. By weapons, I mean the cell phones, the gadgets, the electronics. As I travel our country now, and I see kids in clinics and in hospital settings, I see kids sort of in different locations. I still see a lot of healthy children in our country, but I see them primarily in rural areas where it's just really amazing to me. I walk into the exam room and they actually look me in the eye and they say hello. And they actually caught one reading a book the other day. He didn't have a gadget in his hands, but he had a book. I hadn't seen a kid reading a book in an exam room for a very long time. I almost did a double take. I'm like, wow, this kid's reading a book. And it was a good book. It wasn't a piece of trash. I could see the title of it. And I said, what do you do after school? And he says, I have chores to do on his family farm. Mm-hmm. These kids are healthy. They're taking part in activities with their livestock. They have chores to do.
Yep.
They don't have a gadget attached. Help your children understand that these cell phones are poison. They're poison, and they can have very healthy relationships with their group of friends if they all carry a flip phone, and they can get a hold of a parent if they need you. They can do all the things that they want to do with a phone, but not the things that are bad for them, such as the videos and the sheer indoctrination.
I was one of the parents, one of those guys that I didn't let my kids have phones right away.
Yeah.
They had their licenses and all that stuff probably just after they were able to get a phone, and I wouldn't buy them one. I says no. But all their buddies, all their friends had it.
Yeah. Good for you. It was one of the larger experiments that was done on our kids because no one really knew what these gadgets constantly in the hands of a child were going to do to them. And I think we can see very clearly that the mental health of this nation's children is not good. We've fallen off a cliff with it. If you compare the late 1990s,
yep.
If you compare the late 1990s and the mental health of kids then to now, it's very clear we have a shortage of psychiatrists. There's continuous talk in Washington State about how to add more psychiatrists. My point there to my colleagues was, well, sure, we need more psychiatrists, but we need to cut the pipeline that's creating this mess in the first place. Like, who's looking at why this is happening? Yes, we need to deal with the fact that it is happening, but let's figure out how to get these kids into a healthier place to begin with. And, you look at a 6-year-old and they're just, your average 6-year-old still is so happy and carefree and, just wonderfully spirited. And by the time they get to be 16, they're jaded. They've been watching too much of this programming where they tell them how much their life is horrible, how they shouldn't have to work. They're feeding them. Have you watched this children's programming lately? It's just garbage. I sat down and watched some recently. It's horrible. And I even found an app that was just available. Someone showed it to me. It was disgusting. It was geared towards 8-year-olds. And it was an app that talked about having on the app, it had animated characters, and it talked about having, about the characters having sexual relations with one another.
Right.
And like in groups, like 3 or 4 of them at once. And you were supposed to pick who your sexual partners would be. And this was geared towards 8-year-old children. This is absolute garbage, and it needs to be shut down. And that is not, people squawk about, oh, that's censorship. That's like,
right.
No, that's called parenting.
Yes.
That's called parenting.
Yep. You're not their friend. You're their parent. And I want them to say that, first of all, we love you. Your mom and mom, I love you. We are going to guide you. And after that, we will be friends. But
when you become an adult, we'll become friends. But when you're a child, I'm your parent, and that's the way it is. And we've lost that. We've lost that in our country. I see kids in practice, as crazy as this sounds. I see 4 and 5-year-olds fairly often in clinic who are not fully potty trained.
Wow.
And these are neurologically normal children, typically developing children. They're not children who, have neurological challenges or things like that, where they might not be able to toilet train. But these are neurologically typically developing children who are not toilet trained. And some of them I've met, they literally will change their own pull-ups at some point, but they don't really care about going to the bathroom because they're just sort of used to sitting in it. And the first time I saw children like this, I thought, what in the world? And then I just saw more of them. I had a pediatrician colleague the other day tell me that she left general pediatric practice because she couldn't take it any longer, because the behavioral challenges that were coming in one after another. She said, this is stuff that we never used to see. It's because they're not being parented. I had a number of parents bring children to me because they had missed over a month of school, like, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. And I said, well, why have they missed so much school? Because he's sick. And I said, well, surely you've brought him into our office. And if he's been sick for over a month, you've been in here because we would want to know if there's a fever for over, 5 to 7 days. Oh, no, he hasn't had a fever. He's just really fatigued. And so I'm taking a history, and the child goes to bed at 9 o'clock at night. But I'm like, well, what time do you go to sleep? Oh, about 4 or 5 in the morning. Is he playing these kids are playing video games all night, and the parent knows, but then doesn't take him to school the next day and writes in an excuse. And now the schools, where is the parenting? We need parenting back in our nation.
Can't blame the kids. You got to blame the parents. But how did we get here? How did we get here? How do we fix this? Because this is my next segue. How do we fix this, and how did we get here? How do you just say, look, people, wake up. Get your head out of your butt. Pay attention to what's really right. Tell me your thought.
I think we got here by turning into a very fearful nation, and we became very fearful of saying anything to anybody else, and very intolerant also of listening to other people, right? Like we've had, like I'm sure you've seen this crazy, almost Civil War-like behavior within families where people quit talking to their grandparents, where they quit talking to their aunts or uncles, usually over politics. But then it's so sad, and so they lose that support system that they would have had. The grandmother who would have helped them raise the child and shown them how to do that. We've lost a lot of our support, our community support.
Yeah.
There's so many reasons for it. Let's talk for a minute though about what we can do. And I think this is the part where I feel like there is so much that the listener can do.
Okay.
And because I know as a listener, people sitting there are probably thinking, okay, well, this communism / Marxism, globalism, whatever you call it, ism is something I can't really fix. Not individually, like none of us can fix any of this individually, but together we all can. And that is by not complying with the crazy.
Yes.
And by staying sane and logical for the children around you. So please, like whatever you're doing right now, many of you have raised your own kids. Many of you know exactly how to take care of kids and how to give them a sane and rational
childhood
environment to be in.
Yep.
Childhood. Find a child. I'm not saying to do anything illegal, but find a child in your family or in your neighborhood or in your community through church or through somewhere, and be a meaningful influence on that child's life. Help them understand that what they're hearing at school if they attend these schools that are indoctrinating them. That's another topic. I right now feel like the kids need to come out of those places, out of those schools, and be taught in an environment where it's not crazy, but be that sane influence on a child's life. We can all do that, and continue to push and speak for freedom, free speech. This young generation right now is being taught that it's okay to censor people, that it's okay to quiet other people's voices. And they need to hear from you that it's not okay, that our nation is built on many, many wonderful foundations, but one of those is free speech and freedom, and that we need to respect people's differing opinions. We need to listen to them, and we need to not just shut them down. I think in part, we all became intolerant of other people's differing opinions because of social media. They put that button in there where you could silence people, right? What's it called on Facebook? Where you just push a button and you block them. I didn't never did Facebook.
Unfollow.
So unfollow or block somebody.
Yeah.
Oh, they said something I didn't like. I'm going to unfollow them. No, teach these children that it's great to hear different opinions. That's how you grow. That's how your mind grows. That's how you develop.
It's great to hear different opinions.
Someone may say something totally out there, but just say, tell me more. Why do you feel that way? And have a conversation about it. And maybe you'll learn something. You may not decide that you agree with them. I certainly wouldn't agree with a lot of what's out there right now, but I'm interested in hearing about why people feel that way. And sometimes when they hear your perspective, they will, they'll change their mind a little bit too. That's how we all have that dialogue. So please be an influence in a child's life. Yeah.
And let's not weaponize it. Whether you're on the left or right or way left or way right, don't weaponize that. These kids,
sure.
They need to understand that.
Yeah.
It's okay to disagree.
Yeah, it is okay to disagree. And unfortunately, and that's something we didn't have time to talk about really today, but that's part of what I'm really alarmed about when it comes to our medical schools, because these young people, a few years pass, and all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, that high schooler is now a medical student.
Mm-hmm.
And they're about to become one of your future doctors, and they are just as intolerant increasingly in medical schools now and in law schools as we would imagine they would be, raised in this kind of a climate. So we're seeing students be very intolerant of differing perspectives and differing ideas, and being able to tolerate that. And unfortunately, those students are just a few years from becoming your physician. And so we have a really huge problem right now in terms of our colleges and in terms of our graduate schools, medical school, law school, other doctoral programs. These students are not very tolerant.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of problems that this country will have to face as a result of that coming years. But we need to help these children find a better foundation.
And not every doctor is going to be a Dr. House MD.
Yeah.
You remember the TV show Dr. House?
Yeah.
Brilliant doctor, zero bedside manner.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, there's a lot. We could talk about medical education for a whole hour. We really have a lot of problems with we have some really good people still in medical school. I don't want you to leave thinking that we don't, but we have a lot of problems in our medical education right now. First and foremost being this loss of free speech across the country. It's not just the one medical school that came after me, but it's all of them. There's a problem with our ability to allow our students and to teach them that critically thinking and speaking out is okay. And
maybe a different episode for that one, huh?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure with that. So.
I do want to respect your time. We are 34 minutes into this second segment, and some parting words for these people. I know you just said an excellent closeout about the kids.
Yeah, we really, the direction we're headed in, we are headed in a direction that is extremely dangerous. And I believe that many people see what's happening, but I'm alarmed that there are still many in our nation that do not see the danger that this country is in right now. I think probably because of my perspective from Washington State, I saw it from a few different angles, and we are headed off a cliff as a country. We have to turn this around. And the way that happens is by not complying with tyranny, with ridiculous asks of you by speaking out about your concerns about what is happening, about not being politically correct,
There you
and
go.
not worrying about being politically correct,
There you
because we
go.
have been too kind. We have been too kind. We are trying so hard to avoid any sort of confrontation with people that we have let them just walk right over us.
Yep.
And it is time to be very, very loud. And so I want to be very clear. I know your listeners are from all over the world. This is not just for Americans, but it is time for this world to be very, very loud about what is happening. We will not tolerate people trampling on our freedom. We will not tolerate people trampling on our ability to speak and to think and to take care of our children. We are literally fighting for the future of this next generation of children and for our grandchildren. We literally are. And every day there are new encroachments on our ability to take part in society as free human beings. And we cannot let this continue. So please continue to speak out. I'm obviously not advocating for anything that would be violent or physical, but we do this with our words, and we do not tolerate this any longer. We do not tolerate.
Well, not physical yet. We have had
Yes.
civil wars in this country, and sometimes, you know what? They don't listen to one method.
Well, yeah. Are we going to eventually end up in a civil war? It's very likely and very possible. But right now, I can't advocate for that. My
Not at all.
push right now
Who would want
for everybody
that?
is of course not. But my push is for everyone to stop being so politically correct that you sit here and you let them trample over your children's future and over the future of your grandchildren. Because there is no doubt in my mind they're coming for your freedom, and they already have shown that, and they've already come for it. So,
Why don't you hit that website again that you were talking about earlier?
yeah, so please look at silentmajorityfoundation.org, silentmajorityfoundation.org. I'm Dr. Moon, Moon. Read about what happened. Again, it's not about me. I have lost income in this. I may lose my entire career at some point as they come after us. That is something I can absolutely live with. If that happens, I will be heartbroken. It will not be a good thing, but I can live without my career. What I cannot live without is our freedom. We all have to be free people. And this cannot continue. And so we all need to speak out and do whatever it takes. If you lose a friend, so you lost a friend that wasn't a true friend,
Right.
you need to speak out. Yeah.
Whew. I sound like Pink Floyd in that one, don't I? Whew.
I know it's an interesting world right now for sure.
It is, but I thank you for coming on the show and telling us your all. We'll have another episode if it works for you, and let's talk about the medical system. I was expecting today more of another COVID show, and the wife, she goes, you beat COVID to death. I says, I get it, but I want to do something different, something that you had personal intel, very intimate with that, and you hit this ball right out of that park.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I just, when you see it, you have to make a lot of noise about it. And so I've done nothing but continue to speak out the last several years about how alarmed I am with the direction that we're headed in. And I appreciate your platform to be able to speak. I'm happy to come on, and I have much more to share about what I see happening in the healthcare system just in general, and especially how it pertains to the training of this next generation of physicians. I've been involved in healthcare medical education training for my whole career, and we are headed in a direction that really alarms me for a lot of reasons. But we can talk about that more if you would like to have me on sometime. So
I would love that. I'd love that.
I would be happy to. Yeah, happy to.
And you mentioned Dr. Mark McDonald.
Yes, yeah.
Do you have access to him?
Absolutely. I will plug you in with him. Yeah, I'll send it to you now. He would love to come on your show.
Because he sounds like a very interesting fellow.
Oh, he's wonderful. Dr. Mark McDonald, we interviewed him. Dr. Jim Thorpe and I co-host a show called Two Docs, just TWO and DOCS on Worldview Weekend platform.
Okay.
And we interviewed Dr. Mark McDonald for that not too long ago. I'll text you his contact information now. I'm sure he won't mind.
Well, just reach out and say, a guy who knows a guy who robbed a guy once.
Yeah, no, I'll ask him, but he would love to come on, I'm sure. And he has such insight into what's happening. I mean, he's a child psychiatrist. This is what he's done for his whole career, right? My role as a pediatrician, I've watched these kids grow up, and they're now young adults, and I'm seeing yeah, we didn't talk about the COVID shot once tonight, which is great, because I think it has been talked about a lot, but it still deserves some discussion because of the way in which it still sits on our childhood shot schedule.
We talked about the side effects of COVID.
Yeah, but this trajectory that we're on right now is not. We're not going to survive this as a nation if we don't turn this around. I'm being very blunt about it. We're headed in a terrible direction.
Candor is good. We need that.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. So,
Dr. Moon, thank you again for taking your evening. And I'll tell you what, this drops on Sunday. They're automatically dropped. We'll put some flyers in there, some brochures, that type of production stuff. Okay. And I don't think I have much editing to do. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you to the listener. Thank you all for listening and for your battle in support of freedom. Thank you.
And that's kind of a wrap for HUDcast. We're going to answer some emails here. Thanks again for listening. The guys in Australia were plugging in, and I appreciate that. The Eastern Bloc, I get you. I hear you. Maybe this will spread some light on what you're doing over there. The Ukraine guys, hey, I'm sorry they're in that spot, but I get it. I mean, what do? You're in the middle of a war type of thing. So, for those people that wrote in on that. Again, thanks everybody for being part of the show. HUDcast is signing off, and until next time.
And that's a wrap for HUDcast. HUDcast is, again, a pragmatic approach to seeing things how some people see them. If you like our show, give us a thumbs up on the Facebook site. Again, for HUDcast, thank you again. Have a wonderful evening.